Simon Cole, welcome back to Shrink Wrap Radio.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. It has been a while. I say welcome back because it was episode in 2014.
That's right.
Episode 431, Stillness in Mind. And this is not unrelated to that, a continuation in some ways. And let's see, that's at least 6 years ago. So you have not been resting on your laurels.
I haven't been resting. There have been a couple more books. There have been a couple of collections of themed meditations and a book which I call Pathways. The subtitle is Humanity's Search for Its Soul. So there have been other things in between.
Yeah.
And now this is my project of the moment.
Okay.
It's grown out of the retreats and the work that I do here with people who visit us.
Yeah. So speaking of the retreats, I want to let the audience know that some years ago, you and your wife retired from the UK and moved to the French Pyranees, where you've got a retreat center. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about your retreat center. How many people do you handle? Is it large? Is it little? Is it just a little cabin there where you live, or what is it?
It's got quite a large space, but we are little in terms of the groups that we handle. We'll welcome up to 6 people in a group.
So that's a nice size to work with.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
We started, in fact, offering what we call therapeutic stays. I come as a therapist to this, obviously.
Okay.
And so we were offering therapeutic stays as residential counselling. So we provided everything. People stayed here and they lived here for a few days, anything up to 3 weeks. In fact, we have once had somebody living here 2 months on that basis.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So we had that, and then we brought in the groups, and the groups are primarily around meditation and relationship work. That's most of it. Not couples counselling per se, but relationship in the sense of human relating. And that's a big theme for us.
What if somebody who is listening to this or watching it would like to get more information about your retreat center? Normally we do that at the end, but since we're talking about it, let's go right there.
Well, we've got a number of websites, and
just give us one, the key one.
Okay, well, the retreat center is called Le Sentier Tranquille. Now that's French, so I'll spell it.
Good.
LESENTIERTRANQUILLE.
Okay, well, for our listeners and viewers, I'll be sure to put that in the show notes. So if you didn't manage to get it, I'll put that link in the show notes. Now,
I'm sorry, that was a bit convoluted.
Yeah.
In actual fact, if you simply Google Simon Cole France, you will get a whole page of connections and links, and you'll find it amongst them.
Okay, there we go.
Find it in that.
That's what we need.
Just Simon Cole France will get you.
Yeah. Now, I understand that you've been a musician since childhood. Tell us about that. What instrument or instruments, etc.?
It was the piano originally. The dedication in my book actually is a memory of my father, who introduced me to music from the age of, I'm not quite sure, I think it was probably 4 and a half, something like that. And I went through the standard classical piano.
Wow. Yeah.
And I took that right up to a fairly advanced level, dropped off while I was at university a bit, because, all sorts of new things come in at university. Yeah. I was a half decent pianist at 18, and I've been going downhill ever since.
Okay. So we need to reassure people that they don't have to be musicians to read your book or to enjoy this conversation that we're going to have. And that's kind of in the subtitle on the cover of your book.
Yeah.
And so don't click off, everybody. Don't click off. This is relevant to you.
No, absolutely not. It's one reason why I put the K in, So it's musicking with a K in the middle, just to
Yeah.
take it away from music, oh, scary word for somebody who doesn't think they're musical.
Right.
Because musicking, in the way that I define it in the book, is not necessarily at all anything that we conventionally think of as music.
Yeah.
So, as I say in my book, musicking in the way we develop it in the book can be anything from standing on one leg, waving your arms about, dancing, poetry, dialogue, all of that. All of that is in musicking. It doesn't have to be music as MUSIC.
And people need to hold that idea in mind. I like the way that you just put it, the range of things that it could involve. In a note to me, you wrote, I seek to shift our perception of mindfulness as a state and therefore essentially static to something more like a way of being, which has a flow, the antithesis of the conventional pathology of neurosis of processes somewhere blocked.
Did I say all that? Did I?
I think I would have left off the last part.
Yeah, I think I might have done as well.
For here, but I like the first part.
But actually, that kind of joins up the two threads, the music and the mindfulness, because it came to me, oh gosh, 10 years ago or so, but it's been developing over all that period. That the essence of music actually lent itself to this idea of shifting from the staticness of mindfulness to allowing it to be something flowing, because life flows.
Yes.
Living isn't digital, living is analog.
Yes. So you're suggesting that you're creating or have created a guide to a new kind of mindfulness. And so I have to ask you, well, what's wrong with the old kind of mindfulness?
Nothing whatever. I'm not denigrating anything at all, because I guess what I have to admit in the end is that what I've described as musicking mindfulness, in fact, is I was going to say goes beyond. That sounds like a criticism. It's not. It kind of uses mindfulness and shifts our focus towards flow, as opposed to a state. It's the state thing that I'm trying to.
I struggled with that, I have to tell you, because I don't think of mindfulness as static. Now you describe it as static, but I always think of it as, paying attention to the stream of what's going on, and without judgment. And if it's a stream, then to me it's not static.
But where are you going? Because the mindfulness is in you, and you are there doing the receiving.
Okay.
And the receiving, the receptor, if you like, is the static part, is the state. Now,
one thing that you do that expands it, and I'm jumping way ahead though, is you bring in a kind of social dimension to it. Yeah. And so that definitely is an expansion. But I'm jumping ahead just a little bit. I wanted to ask you what's your definition of musicking, this new mindfulness?
Musicking, you'll remember in the introductory chapter, I set out 3 elements: musicking, yes, dialoguing, and leveling.
Yes.
I'm sorry about the word leveling. It's a bit of a it's not a very satisfactory word, but I couldn't find another one. But we'll come to it. That's the relating part. So these 3 elements, the musicking layer of that is the receiving and the manifesting. So with mindfulness, we are the receptor of the stream of stuff that is around, the real stuff, the actual stuff, the now stuff. We are the receptor, and our awareness resides in us. But what musicking, or I'm seeking to add, is the path to manifesting ourselves back into the world that is giving us.
That's always the challenge. To bring it into the world. Now, let's go through each of the 3 that you just mentioned. dialoguing is one of the elements, I guess, that you're speaking about.
Yeah,
Is that the right
dialoguing, dialoguing, which doesn't have to be talking, but between human beings more often than not it is. But then there's lots of other things coming, and we read body language and we get stimuli from around. But also we can dialogue with, in a way, we can dialogue with nature. We can dialogue with nature. We are simply another species on the planet, and we're part of the planet, and we're within it. We're not super. We're not above it. If you might recall, in one of the later chapters in the book, and the book isn't very long, as you know, I mentioned a little anecdote about coming down from a walk from the ridge on the mountains, and this deer barking at me so loudly.
I do remember that. Are you saying it was a deer? I remember.
It was a deer.
Pardon?
It was a stag. Yes, it was
a stag.
Yeah.
Kind of making a barking sound.
That's right. And it was a kind of dialogue. It was a kind of dialogue. If we had time, I could read that passage, I guess. But I believe that we dialogue in all sorts of ways, and between human beings. Most often, the thing we're most familiar with, obviously, is talking. And the dialogue then, the dialogue is the mode of doing the exchange, that particular mode of doing the exchange. But equally, there are cultures where a dialogue is actually sung. Now, here's your musicking coming in. Nothing like Western music, nothing like it at all. But musical sounds are used to actually exchange information. So the musicking world isn't all like what we think as Westerners as music. It goes way beyond that.
Okay. I'm still on the stag and being in nature, because we have squirrels that visit us on our deck, and we do talk to them.
Yeah.
And we get a sense too, and a blue jay, and they are responsive. They communicate with us. One of the squirrels is quite aggressive and plasters himself on the glass sliding door.
Yeah.
Looking, hey, where are the nuts? Hey.
Yes. And we have something similar, and many people find with their pets, cats and dogs. Every individual cat and dog has a character, has a particular personality, and if you interact, then that personality comes out to you in your interaction with the pet, and you will find yourself talking, gesturing towards each one according to the personality they have. And so now we have a dialogue. We have a way of understanding each other. Me and my cat, me and my dog, or whatever.
And also, I think being in nature in a wilderness kind of area, and being alone, I notice in myself that I'll talk. You could call it talking to myself, but I'll start vocalizing out loud, and I might be inclined to talk to a tree or a flower.
Yeah.
That it's interesting that that emerges. When one. I don't think I'm unique in that. That if you're alone and you're not worried about being overheard, you start to vocalize.
Yes. I go along with that completely, and I've had a similar sort of experience. Outside, I find I generally sort of pick up my Native American flute and sort of pause and kind of exchange with the wind, if you like.
Yes.
Air is another important thing, but yes, I feel for what you say there. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so we have dialoguing, and the next one is
this rather cumbersome word, leveling.
Leveling, yeah. What are you getting at there with leveling?
That comes from, you recall from Stillness and Mind, and most of my books contain something about the insights of Martin Buber, which to anybody as a therapist, he is most often known by his iconic work, I and Thou. In fact, he
Yes.
wrote an awful lot more than I and Thou, but nevertheless,
Really?
that
Yeah.
tends to be what he is known by. And the essence of it is that it differentiates the way in which we feel ourselves as I when we are with the outside world. So if we look at something, we are making it an object because we are looking at it and we are giving ourselves a description, not necessarily articulating it, but we're kind of allowing in a description. We're fixing it as the thing that we've defined it as. So we have that. But the problem with that is that we don't actually have a relationship with anything that we're treating like that. We can't have a relationship with it because we're fixing it where it was when we cast our eyes on it. And now, 10 seconds later, it's not the same thing. Okay, visually, it might be very similar, but life goes on living and every created thing goes on living all the time.
So how do we get to the word leveling? I know you feel like it's not quite the right word, but...
Okay, fair enough. I've gone off the point there. Leveling is the best expression I could get because Buber also talks about I and thou. Yeah. And he says that if we allow the other thing, but I'll call it, we'll talk about people. Now, if we allow the other person, truly allow from our deepest attitude, allow that person to be everything that they are, and okay as everything that they are, even though we can't know everything that they are, of course. But if we allow them to be that and then allow ourselves to dialogue with them, then we're having a genuine meeting and a genuine relationship.
Here's how I get to what you're saying. I have to rationalize it in my own head if I can. One expression that we have is, let me level with you, or
yes.
That's kind of saying, okay, I want to be really truthful with you right now. If you say level with me, you're calling for that. And then also I'm getting that we're now on level ground because previously maybe I had elevated myself as hard not to be in the place of judgment in one way or another. And so I'm getting off of the place of judgment and saying we're standing on the same ground as two naked human beings.
Yes, that is absolutely it. And I must admit, you prompted me there with leveling, and I hadn't come to it that way, and I hadn't thought of it, but absolutely, completely.
Well, I'm struggling to understand, but good. Yeah, dialogue is one way to clarify.
There's just one other thing about that, and that is that Buber used the term I thou. So when we are like that with somebody, when we're having a dialogue with somebody, and my I, even though I'm not saying I all the time, but nevertheless, there is an I there. My I is that sort of I. I'm in that sort of state. He called it I thou. And the idea of thou is that it's the sort of 17th century English word, which has to be a subject and has to be singular. All right. Now, the problem with modern English, both British and American English, is that we use you. And you can be subject, object, singular, plural. It's a whole lot.
Oh, yeah.
But thou can only be singular and subject. And so if you put I and thou together, what you're saying is that you are sharing my I thou. We're a joint subject of what's going on. And that's a very significant point about the words that Buber uses.
Yeah, I appreciate having that linguistic background that I didn't know about. And I always think of it in relation to not seeing the other person as an it, that somehow it's removing that sort of objectifying. But again, we're together on the same level.
Yeah.
And what you're adding to that as well is a sense of immersion. We are both immersed in this moment.
Yes, I like that. Yeah. So the leveling, that's the leveling. The leveling was the best description I could get, because I didn't want to use I, thou as part of the algorithm, if you like. I wanted to use the effect of I, thou.
Yeah. Okay. And then we come to the other element, flow. You emphasize, I liked what you said about flow, that there are two key rhythms, going back to the musical metaphor that runs throughout the book, and you don't have to be a musician. It's just a metaphor. But you emphasize that there are two key rhythms in our lives: breathing, and our heartbeat.
And our heartbeat.
And I like that. That's very concrete. I can grab a hold of that. How do these play in your conception of mindfulness?
I introduced rhythm right at the beginning, because the book is set out, as you know, as a kind of jazz set, sort of.
Yeah, that's right. Jazz, right. That's what I was thinking as I was going through it, that I don't remember a place where you specifically say jazz, but it seemed to me that you don't say jazz, but I was getting that, he wants us to be free, to improvise, to play, to together in engagement, either with some part of ourselves or with another person, to have that sort of playful, flowing kind of experience.
And that is I've skipped a bit, I know, but that is where the rhythm comes in, because rhythm is essential, as I said in third chapter, I think. Without rhythm, a sound is noise. It has to have rhythm. We tend to think it has to have melody, and melody is good, obviously, but actually it's without rhythm. So if an aeroplane goes over in the air, right, what do you call it? Noise. There's no rhythm. Yeah. But as soon as you add a rhythm into it, add a rhythm even in what at first might seem a noise. So for instance, let's say, because of the airwaves or the atmosphere or the atmospheric pressure, that sort of loud screeching air sound starts to have a kind of thump to it. Okay, now we have a rhythm. Now it's something else. It's not just noise.
Yeah. Or even a branch being blown by the wind against the side of your house.
Yeah. Yes.
Might get that. Or sometimes, I think sometimes maybe our brain imposes rhythm on, like, let's say the refrigerator motor in the background. That might start to have that that kind of periodicity that you were just illustrating.
It starts to have a beat.
Yeah.
And maybe some of that actually is coming from inside us. Some of it is actually our beat linking and resonating.
It also makes me think of drumming, and particularly like African drumming, Cuban drumming, where there's not, they may hit the tone, there may be some tonality in the drums, but the rhythm itself just can communicate so powerfully.
Yes.
And it makes our body move,
and the rhythm can grow out of us, because I start with drums with a group, in fact. With one of my music and meditation groups, I actually start with drums, and I give people the African drums. I've got a different sound, but this is a generally
the singing drum that you can, as you squeeze it, the tone changes.
So you can't squeeze it, but actually you walk along, and it's hung from your shoulder, and so you're playing it at the side of you. But what I ask people to do is simply sit and wait quietly for a moment, and then put their hand to the drum and just let their hand produce what feels like them. What feels like you at the moment. And it might be something like that. So my life, there's nothing in my life. It's just sort of, I'm not aware of anything. But then, hold on, now I just see.
And that says something about what's going on with you in the moment.
Yes.
And, I can really relate to it, even though I don't publicly identify myself as a musician, not a formally trained musician, but during the folk boom of the 60s, I picked up the guitar and, taught myself to play some degree the guitar. There was a peak. You talked about the decline. There was a peak during that period where I was growing with it and learning music and, learning songs and learning special guitar techniques and so on. And so actually it wasn't going away to the university that made me lose it. It was going away to university where I got it.
There you go.
And then when I moved on into life, it began to decline. I tried to pick up piano late in life, and my memory was not good enough to really, but improvisation is what I want to get to. I've always loved improvisation, and I've been lucky enough to have a friend or two, one who just recently died, a dear friend in New Hampshire. But he was a better musician than I was, but he would come down to my level and we would play in that space. And we would have a recorder, the flute, you mentioned the flute, the recorder. And sometimes, and we would just weave around one another with no plan. And the amazing thing always, and I'm sure you've had this experience, is we stop on a dime. You experience the end of that. You can feel it, you hear it, and without any plan, boop, it ends for both people. Have you've had that experience?
I've had that. I've had something like that. Yes.
Yeah.
With a group. Just going back a second. What you described to me there, as you described, was a dialogue. Your improvisation
definitely.
was a dialogue with your friend, and it happened to be a dialogue with instruments and. And totally. Well, not totally, about 300 years earlier to your experience there. One of the things I do at some stage with a group, a residential group here, when I use various ways to bring out how dialogue happens, and it can be spoken, it can be moved, it can be danced, it can be all sorts of ways. But I actually play people 2 or 3 of Bach's two-part inventions.
Yeah, I love Bach.
And there you have, and you can hear people who aren't musical, after we've been working with the idea of dialogue, can hear J.S. Bach's version, which is about 300 years before yours. But equally, if you send me a recording of one of yours, I'd play one of yours as well.
Well, I said I wasn't a trained musician, and because of that, I took a course as an adult at one point in my life, before I went to New Hampshire and played with my friend. I took a recorder course, and we were learning to read music, to read a melody line on the recorder. And our teacher put us into groups, and it was ecstatic when we would hit that point where we were in harmony. And once she brought a harpsichord player and maybe an oboe and a couple of other things, and here I am, a rank amateur, and I'm having this experience of being in a musical group, and I fall apart. I either start laughing because the emotion just wells up. It's a kind of joy.
It is. It is. It can generate that.
Yeah.
You are having a whole different, and you're taking part in creating.
Yeah.
You're not the only one taking part, because of course you're doing the receiving and the manifesting. You're in both parts of that layer.
Yeah.
And you're creating a new way of relating.
Yeah. By the way, I want to mention to our audience that you have in the book, you've got some exercises and examples that you offer people to try on their own.
Yes.
And so you do that in your workshop, and as much as you can, you try to bring that workshop experience into the book.
Yes. And the book I look on as it's an instruction book. I do a summary at the end of all the kind of exercises, so that because I really want people to read the book and live the book.
Mhm.
The main part of the book as it's going on. So I summarize everything at the end so that they don't have to worry and keep bookmarking things and trying to remember things and writing notes and all that sort of stuff. I want people to have the experience of living the book as they go through.
Yeah. Well, you go on to talk about harmony, and that's where you get into discussion about Martin Buber and I and Thou.
Yeah.
And that's where I picked up on you. I think you mentioned the human tendency to be judgmental comes in there, that can get in the way of an I thou experience.
And even we do it without intending to be judgmental. I'm not reading all human beings as being sort of some manipulative, malicious. No, it's not. It's not that at all. We simply do it. I give the example of somebody passing by a group of people on the road, on the pavement, don't I? And stepping off the pavement and worrying about what they're like. So all sorts of preconceptions about, oh dear, am I safe here, and all that sort of stuff.
Oh,
and then looking back at these apparently fearsome young black-clad people or whatever, and seeing one of the men lift up a 5-year-old onto his shoulders because he was so excited at being able to see the football match in the park.
Yeah.
But as we approach, all that's in our mind is, am I safe here? What's this going to be about? What had I better do? And we miss half of the picture.
Well, I think of if I were to go to one of your workshops, as I've done many times in the past, not with you, but other kinds of experiences like that. And the way that I experience people when I first walk in, and then contrast that with later as I get to know them a bit. And initially they may look kind of weird. What have I gotten myself into with a bunch of gimps here? Some kind of judgment may come in. And it may be, for some people, it's going to be a negative self-judgment. Of a comparison of all of these people look like they've really got it together. They're not going to like me or whatever. So I totally relate to what you're talking about. As
and that if we're not aware, and this is an aspect within the whole concept of mindful awareness. This is one of the elements of awareness as well. If we're not aware of how this happens, how we portray like this, how we react like this, then it actually compounds. And it doesn't compound because we're willing something nasty on anybody. It simply compounds because, okay, so somebody is, maybe a friend is slightly offhand with me, doesn't say hello properly because, what do I think? Oh, well, see if I care, sort of thing. And we give a very offhand reaction, and then actually that friend was in a lot of trouble, and it would have been much better if we'd said, oh, something up. Okay, but the problem is that we've given our offhand reaction, and now what does the other person do? The other person extends that because they think, oh, I might think, oh, she doesn't want to know me. He doesn't want anything to do with me. Oh, well, okay, to hell with the rest of the world. I'll ignore everybody. It has an escalator effect.
It's resonating back and forth. It can lead to a relationship of projections, right? As thinking of therapy and the model of projection in therapy, where my facade is pissed off at your facade, which pisses off your facade.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so the reason for making this an element is that really it is essential. It is essential in order to have a real exchange with the world, whether the world is nature or something that's going on, or whether it's another person, it doesn't matter, whether it's animals. To have a real exchange, we have to allow ourselves not to bring in any facade which is going to mean that we don't see the full picture. We don't see everything that might be able to be seen. Let's put it that way, because we can never see everything, obviously, but might be able to be seen.
Something that you mentioned in the book that was total news to me is you speculate that the Neanderthals may have been more musical than ourselves. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you get there.
Yes. This comes from 2 or 3 of the sources that I've used. I record it from way back, but it's to do with socialization. Now, this is very interesting. The Homo line ending up in Homo sapiens, were their social structure was such that they needed to interact and gather in groups and tribes, and therefore they needed communication on a precise level, relatively precise, not precise in our terms, obviously, but relatively precise. The Neanderthals were a totally different social structure, and they were much more of a nuclear community structure, and therefore the exchanges, a lot of the exchanges could be understood without needing to be articulated. I put that in inverted commas because it still wasn't articulation as we would have heard it, obviously. But it is speculated, what that enabled was a more musical way of expression than actually the Homo sapiens line going alongside. Even to the point of 1 or 2 people have suggested that the Neanderthals, there is evidence that the Neanderthals may actually have been pitch perfect.
Perfect pitch.
Because that's the sort of argument that, okay, Homo sapiens wasn't the ultimate source of everything that we might feel as good and want to applaud in the way we are. The Neanderthals, who lived, of course, for 100,000 years alongside Homo sapiens.
I don't think most of us realize that.
No, I don't think most people do. I don't think most people do.
And then and according to a recent book I'm sure you've read, but I'm blocking on the title, we kind of wipe them out, is the thesis of this book, that our species tends to wipe out just about everything we come in touch with.
Wipe them out because of the way the habitats were used and the migration happened. It wasn't specifically a violent annihilation or anything like that, but it was that the Homo sapiens became more adept and more skilled at being able to survive and survive and take advantage of the changing habitat.
Yeah. Okay.
And Neanderthals didn't have the large brains as humans. So.
Yeah. Let's see. Going further in your book, you back to the dialogue. You talk about. So you say there are 3 types of dialogue: monologue, pretending, and genuine. I can see how we've kind of been touching on those, but maybe you'd like to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, this is primarily back to Buber again, and I actually with my groups, when people come here for retreats, I actually have various exercises to demonstrate the 3 types of dialogue. So the first is monologue, or the first I take is monologue, which is where somebody is being spoken to, but they're being spoken to in a way that doesn't give them a chance to respond, and the speaker is simply setting out what she or he believes, and this is it, and there's no question, and obviously it's right, isn't it? And you agree with me, don't you? And don't wait for an answer, simply go on.
Yeah.
We also have a way of monologue, which is pretending to be dialogue, pretend dialogue, where we do apparently wait for a response. So we ask a leading question, the other person responds, but then we leap in and give a rejoinder to that response,
which we've already rehearsed in our head.
Absolutely. which we've already rehearsed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is what Buber calls pretend dialogue. And then there is genuine dialogue. But genuine dialogue can only happen where there is an availability of our I being I thou. I say availability because we don't live as I thou literally all the time, but we need to have it available so that I can relate to and be wholly in my attitude of you can be everything that you are and it will be okay for me.
Yes. And that relates in my mind to an important concept from the world of psychotherapy, which is psychological flexibility.
Yeah.
That people who, it's a sign of psychological health.
Yes.
If people can be flexible.
Yes.
And as we become rigid, then that's being stuck. I pulled out a passage from your book that I liked. I quote you: "The reason for putting so much emphasis on flow is that it's the very opposite of fixed, which is what we are when we're giving way to our fears and frailties, and when we believe that we lack the power to take hold of our life." And I guess that really relates to what I was just saying about psychological flexibility. That's another way of saying it.
There are so many aspects of our lives, or the way we lead our lives, where we fall prey to fixing things. It's actually an appropriate word. We act as though something, first of all, is as we see it, and is completely as we see it, and is always unchangeably as we see it, and that's what we react to. But hang on, if you turn it around the other way and when we look at ourselves, we wouldn't want anybody thinking that we are absolutely as they see us, because after all, they don't see most of us. And we wouldn't want the other person saying, "Oh, well, there's no possibility of him changing." I'm just
and maybe this also relates to, I mean, there may be a genetic piece of this, or I don't know if it's genetic or social, the whole business about mansplaining, that as men, we want to come in with an explanation of how to fix it. Mm-hmm. And this goes on between my wife and I quite a bit, where she'll say something and I take it, I right away go to, well, you wouldn't be telling me about that if you weren't concerned about it and wanted to have it fixed. And here's an idea how you could fix it. Oh, she just gets enraged when I do that. To me, it feels like a natural thing to do, but it's a source of conflict.
As a species, we're uncommonly bad at dealing with uncertainty and living with uncertainty. Living with uncertainty, even to the extent of just accepting that we don't know everything and can't see everything.
Yeah.
And therefore, because our view is partial, we cannot know anything. And so coming back to your word fix, we cannot actually absolutely say, right, that fixes it.
Yeah.
As if we knew everything about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And tying into that, I think, is your remark in the book that we seem to have a need to feel like we're going somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of related to me. It seems like it's a fixed aspect of our psyche, that we tend to prefer the sense that we're progressing, that we're moving somewhere, that there's a point. What's the point of this conversation?
It's the point bit. It's the point bit. It's always, right from as long as I can remember back being a therapist. I've never been a solution-focused therapist, never ever, of any description in any modality. And I have always, if I saw it as being a significant aspect of the person that I was working with, I've always sought to soften it in some way. I go with direction. I'm quite okay about knowing a direction, because a direction feeds into what I know about myself, and it doesn't have to be fixed, because if I learn something else about myself, then I might choose to change my direction. But it's the point thing, isn't it? The fixed point. That's
Yeah.
where I'm going.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going.
Yeah. So we seem to have a tendency to want to have this sense that it's going somewhere. And so how does that get in the way, and how do we fix
It
that?
feeds into
How
our
do we
need.
fix it?
Yeah, it feeds into our need for certainty, doesn't it?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And we feel better if we can be certain, if we know the shape of things, if we know the size of something.
Yeah.
We feel more comfortable, we feel more secure. It feels a little bit less sure not to know the point we're going at, simply to know that I'm moving in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite the same sort of feeling of assurance, but this takes me really back to the musicking mindfulness thing and the flow. Because if we can allow ourselves, give ourselves the means to, and this is one of the means I believe we can develop in order to make ourselves more comfortable with this as a way of being. If we can allow ourselves simply to be comfortable with knowing that I have this way of exchanging with the world, which doesn't run up against the obstacles presented when I think things are literally as I see them, but allows the flow, like a piece of music.
Mm-hmm.
So we listen to a piece of music, and it flows, and we never listen to the same thing twice.
So it's about learning to listen, learning to be comfortable with the process, to trust the process.
With the process, yes.
Yeah.
I talk quite a lot about process, don't I? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, I think in the end of the book, you dip into some recommendations for practice, because we do have this need to feel like, okay, you've laid out a good model here. How do I progress with it? How do I take
Right.
it in and get there? And of course, musicians practice quite a bit, and you can't have the maximum fun of improvisation. That's been a great limitation for me, unless
Yeah.
you've practiced a lot.
Yes. But you also can as well, because if I take my own example, I was brought up as a classical pianist, and I've been classical pianist throughout my life. And it was about 5 years ago or so, maybe a bit longer, I bought my first Native American flute, and I have never looked at a piece of music in relation to a Native American flute. I just simply started playing it, and I play it, and it's all improvised. I don't write anything down. I don't read any music in order to play it.
Right.
I simply improvise.
Yeah.
And so we can convert. That's a musician's version. There are other versions as well in other forms of musicking.
Do you have any tips before we go, in terms of what recommendations you'd like to leave people with?
I think if you read the book and certain things come out to you, I mean, there are different ideas all the way through. At one point, I suggest playing a song or something you like, even if you're not a musician. Most people like the sound. They have a tune, or they have a song or a record. They play that, but sit down with a piece of paper in front of you, a large piece of paper, and some pencils and some crayons maybe, and just let it play. And just let yourself respond to it. Don't listen to it in a way. I make this point as well. Don't listen to it, because that's making it an object again.
Yeah.
Just allow it to be alongside you, and then take one of the crayons or pencils and just start to draw, shape, whatever the music is doing in you.
Yeah.
And then you can even use that for meditation the next time, with or without the music.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different ways. So if you find something that appeals to you, through one of the ideas, set yourself a time, and for a couple of weeks, do it regardless, simply because you've noticed that it appealed to you. I always think that a particular place and a few trappings around it are good, what you wear, how long you take. Doesn't have to be ages and ages, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't try and go for a 2-hour meditation straight off. But don't be too rigid. Discipline, yes, discipline if you want to become a musician and you want to work with something that way, or anything else, whether that's fitness, whether it's dance, whatever it is. Discipline, yes. But the most important part is consistency. So if you like doing it, take yourself to it and do it regularly. Don't be harsh on yourself because it's different one day than the next day. Yeah, these things are different because we're different. We're
Yeah.
different every time. I think I say somewhere, okay, so you think you did the same dance, but wait a minute, were you wearing the same shoes, or you think you walked the same place? Were you wearing the same shoes? Was the ground the same? What was your mood? We're different. We're different all the time.
Well, I think I like your book, and I like the invitation to come and play with you and to play with myself, play with ourselves, within and without. And so that it's a generous gesture. And I want to thank you for coming back to play with me here today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I've enjoyed it.